Here we go, let's start with that, shall we? As Savvy said, it's been a while since I've been on the stage in real life, and holy shit, has a lot happened in the world during that time, right? Global pandemic, didn't see that one coming. Hope none of you saw that one coming. Yeah, certainly not something any of us planned on, and what it did mean that was we were suddenly forced into this situation where we had to work from home, whether we were set up for it or not. The the getting back to the office argument was thrust into the spotlight as organisations grappled with what the future of it looked like for them. It's been a difficult time for lots of people, but in my opinion, many of the loudest proponents of the back to the office argument are missing one fundamental truth. And that truth is that a remote construct absolutely can and absolutely does work if you have the right tools in place to support it. And as these smart people say, one of those systems is a properly managed internal online community. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Internal community building and the role that it plays in supporting remote work. But more importantly, how to build and nurture them with intent so that they become a safe, rewarding, and most of all, fun place where everyone who works with you chooses to participate in. And to be fair, any of you guys could Google this stuff, but the value that I hope to deliver today comes in sharing my personal experiences and those of my team who are somewhat... My team, thank you team. Phew! This is not my first remote rodeo. I have been working remotely for the last 15 years or so, but none of the organisations I have worked in before have used the power of internal community in the way that we do at Discourse. For some context, we're a fully remote, globally distributed organisation of around 98 people now and counting. And as CEO, I spend a lot of my time thinking about how we maintain a safe, inclusive, productive, fun space for our people to get their work done. We certainly didn't set out 10 years ago to build an internal community for the reasons that we know them to be important today. We simply began by dog fooding or using our own product as we built it. And as we grew and diversified, we built in more and more tooling to support the work that we do and the way that we do it. And what we inadvertently found ourselves with was a literal, complete business source of truth, a virtual glass-walled office where every decision is made collaboratively. We share the choices, we share the decisions, and we give access to all discussions and decisions at all levels of the business. It had really surprising consequences. All of a sudden, people felt empowered, people felt valued, people felt considered. Online communities are a great leveller. They break down silos and encourage collaboration. And if you apply that construct to your remote work, it goes past the work that you do and gives you benefits to your entire organisation. I was employee number 14 when I joined this team. And it's fair to say that what works for a team of 14 is very different from what works for a team of 100 or more. As you grow and diversify, new considerations come into play. It can be really hard to see those when you're deep in the weeds. And that makes scaling your internal community quite challenging. But this talk isn't about scaling, and it's not about diversification. Remote work, by its very nature, encourages diversity. You can hire from around the entire world, and having the flexibility of working from anywhere gives people the opportunity, no matter what raft of challenges they may have, to work in a place that is physically and emotionally safe for them. This talk is about inclusivity. How do we make the place where people virtually work just as safe? And that's where community comes into play. Workplace community building is intrinsically linked to inclusion, and it allows us to leverage the beautiful uniqueness of every individual to create a powerful, unified force. But it doesn't just happen. You have to work really hard to understand everyone's perspective and to make sure that they understand the role that they play in building your culture in a way that's truly inclusive. So you have to make that clear from the moment someone joins. Workplace community building isn't just about team building. It's not just about having a repository for your policies and procedures, and it's not just a place where people can collaborate and communicate. At its heart, workplace community building is about creating a safe space where your team of smart and unique individuals want to spend time working together towards your collective goals. It's no secret that connection can be a very big challenge in remote workplaces. Building an intentional workplace community is one of the best tools that we have found to support our people in feeling connected to something that's even greater than the work that we do together. If you get it right, people look forward to starting their workday because they get to connect with people that they have made truly authentic connections with. Having those meaningful connections and a shared sense of purpose are also foundational enablers of inclusive behaviour. When people are encouraged to learn and understand each other's differences, the result is a beautiful thing to behold. One of the things that I'm most proud of is the part that I play in nurturing and encouraging our people to work together in this inclusive way. But internal communities are more than just a place to build and nurture relationships. They can also act as a powerful vehicle for change within your organisation, because when you create a safe space where people choose to be deeply involved, you provide the opportunity for everyone to have a seat at the table. Imagine a workplace where all decisions are made openly and collaboratively. There are no closed-door meetings, there are no surprise decisions, there's no unexpected change or unrealistic targets. But this reality can only exist if every individual is encouraged and appreciated and empowered to make their voice heard. Sitting at the table isn't worth much if you're just there to listen. So let's talk a bit about how you can create this kind of inclusive culture. Well, there's a lot of talk about belonging and the role that it plays as a motivating factor for joining a community. But as my friend David Spinks explains, belonging is an outcome, not a cause. People don't hop up in the morning and go, might see if I can find an online community to belong to. But when they do find that, they're much more likely to stick around. And belonging in this context is the feeling of security and support that comes when there's a sense of acceptance and inclusion. It's what drives us to form positive relationships with others, and at work these relationships extend to the organisation, to its values, and even to the work itself. And that makes the job of a workplace community builder extremely important. You can't afford for people not to feel like they belong when the community is the place they have to come to do their work every day. No one really likes lurkers in the office. So let's look at the role of belonging in remote workplaces, and then we'll dig into how you can leverage your workplace community to make sure that it happens. There are a ton of studies into the effects of loneliness in a remote workplace, and pretty much everyone warns of the dangers of disengagement, which is widely recognised as a major contributing factor to poor performance. Having a central community that acts as the hub of your workplace opens up a world of opportunity. Now you have a place that people have to visit daily in order to work tactically with their teammates. And if you extrapolate that out into a vehicle for connecting in deeper ways and learning about each other's differences, you can really start to break down those barriers which contribute to loneliness. When that happens, your people start to feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves. Now they're not just a software engineer. Now they're not just employee number 85. They're part of your collective mission. This means they're much more likely to achieve better results because they have a higher sense of purpose. They feel more comfortable sharing their ideas and contributing to decision-making. All of a sudden, you have a much more diverse set of voices to inform your product or your service or your culture. A few years back, HR company CultureAmp conducted a study into diversity and inclusion in tech companies. They surveyed about 7,000 people, and they found that there was one single metric that was consistently and universally tied to a person's workplace commitment. And that metric was a sense of belonging. They also discovered that much of the anecdotal evidence surrounding diversity and inclusion in the workplace to be true, and namely that people from different demographics and backgrounds experience the workplace differently, and that's definitely been our experience at Discourse. I really love this sentiment from a team member that had only been with us for a couple of weeks when she wrote it. And while she's talking about an in-real-life event that she was at, the deep bonds that she talks about were forged solely in our internal community. And interestingly, that same CultureAmp study recognised that the correlation between belonging and engagement is strongest in historically underrepresented groups. They conclude that while diversity and inclusion are important metrics in their own right, there is evidence to suggest that a focus on belonging can more helpfully frame inclusion initiatives within the workplace. So now we're making some progress. Focusing on belonging helps inform a more inclusive remote workplace. So what else does? Well, we hear a lot of talk about culture fit, but what I think we're actually talking about is a values fit. Ultimately, your culture reflects your values. When we hire at Discourse, our first interview is vital. We listen for values, we gauge for transparency and vulnerability, and we talk about how to communicate. A team that shares the same inherent values is really going to work effortlessly together to incorporate their belief systems into your culture. So establishing clear values and expectations prior to hiring has served us well. We've learnt that if we begin by defining and communicating those values at the interview stage, we really set the stage for the level of inclusivity that we expect to see going forward. Sometimes words just fall out of me. And then we really hammer it home by talking regularly about goals and values right from the onboarding stage onwards, so that there is real cohesion of language and intent. This topic was written by a new joiner within his first couple of months of joining, and the fact that he had the courage to contribute this so early on and that he got it so right really is evidence to me that these systems are working. The upshot of this type of transparent communication is a culture of immediate welcoming reciprocity when somebody new joins. This is their first introduction to the reality of living with the values that we have only spoken about so far, and it's our first introduction to their unique thoughts, their values, and their belief systems. It sets the scene for all future interactions, and it gives us the opportunity to help guide them towards their people. Because inclusivity isn't about all being the same, right? It's about acknowledging, accepting, and enjoying the differences. And to do that, you need to encourage microcultures within your organization and really celebrate those. You need to make it very easy for new people to find their inner circle when they can't really see who's in the room. We all want to find our happy place when things are new and confusing, but not everyone's happy place looks the same. Sometimes people with new and different ideas float up, and while those new different ideas might be kind of confronting to us as individuals, there might be a whole raft of other people waiting in the wings for those new different ideas to arrive. Let's call the owners of those new different ideas underrepresented minorities for a moment. These people are your canary in the coal mine. They are your best leading indicator of company culture. If you make things magic for your underrepresented minorities, you almost always make things better for the greater whole. But the important thing is making sure that it's not an emotional effort for people to acclimatize and feel comfortable. Stop and consider for a second how much more of a cognitive load is carried by people that are reading everything in their second language, or how difficult it is for people who come from cultures that don't encourage challenging authority to have a voice. So let's talk about how to communicate. It takes real intentionality to build a culture of inclusive transparency within a remote environment. There's no water cooler or lunchroom that people can hang around in to pick up on social cues. Instead, your culture is written down. So you have to be as explicit about your non-related work communication, you know where I'm going with this, as you are with all your other communication. Put that together. At Discourse, we combat miscommunication or misunderstanding by encouraging long-form over-communication. Storytelling works really well in this context, and it's a great medium for creating an environment where people feel like they belong. They get to go on your journey with you, and they get to take you on theirs. We talk frequently about how to communicate. We steer people away from using bullet points in favor of longer-form paragraphs that really explain intent. We ask people to clarify their colloquialisms, and we encourage prolific question asking. Establishing a convention of asking questions not only helps new joiners feel comfortable to do so because they've had those social cues, it also builds up our internal knowledge base and makes things much easier for the next new joiner. But none of this is going to happen if you don't work hard at it. You will never empower everyone to freely express themselves unless you create a safe space in which it can happen. So let's talk about that. Psychological safety is the belief that anyone can share an opinion without fear of repercussions. In order to create a non-judgmental environment where that can happen, everyone has to be able to fully trust the spoken and the unspoken rules. For us, that means full trust, full accountability. We want to ensure that every single person feels safe to own their mistakes, to speak up readily, and to challenge each other in a healthy and productive way. These are values that have to be instilled immediately from the leadership level right down through your organization. Everyone has to model the behavior that they want to see, and everyone has to feel comfortable calling out the behavior that they don't. Grennan and Whitaker made this very astute assertion when they said that the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior that the leader is willing to tolerate. I'd extrapolate that out to say that the culture of your organization is shaped by the worst behavior that the collective whole is willing to tolerate. This is an all-in game. So to manage that, you've got to have guidelines. GitLab does a great job of defining guidelines for creating psychological safety in remote workplaces in their open source manifesto. And these are the ones that we champion at Discourse. As well as supporting better cross-functional collaboration, these guidelines afford all team members the power to be heard, resulting in a much greater diversity of voices within our organisation. But it can be challenging even with the best guidelines in place. Having a diverse team means that there are lots of different perspectives, and understanding those requires a high level of empathy and intentionality. I personally learned a really valuable lesson last year when one of my teammates had the courage to raise this very valid concern. Might surprise you guys to hear that I am one of those loud voices. And as such, I had to dig really deep to understand the effect that can have on those that aren't. And what I learnt was fascinating. People who are outside of this dominant coalition need to be acknowledged so that they can feel like part of the team without having to sacrifice the things that they're comfortable with or that are important to them, without having to change the way they feel comfortable behaving. They essentially need to be invited in, because in the same way that there are unconscious biases in the construct of face-to-face work, they also exist in a culture of written communication. This time, consider people that are nervous about spelling or grammar, or those that come from a culture where language is used in different ways, or those of us with weird accents. Not so hard in the written culture. This led me to learn more about what's known as the high-low context culture balance, and I think this is fascinating. High context cultures tend to exhibit less direct communication, and they read much more meaning into those less direct messages. On the flip side, low context cultures need very direct communication, and those of us from higher context cultures can often see that as quite blunt or even rude. Understanding that concept has been a game changer for me. I get triggered a lot less at work, and I read with a lot less bias, and that's massive after working in this way for all these years. Then you've got to dig down further into individual personality types. While your extroverted team members may be really comfortable speaking out about things they don't like, your more introverted team members may not. And it's really difficult in a remote construct to see where people lie on that spectrum. Supporting everyone's ability to contribute by asking what other people need and observing what makes them comfortable, especially if it's different from what makes you comfortable, is the only way that you can really build a culture of sharing that isn't skewed by always having those same loud voices in the room. And to achieve that, you need to be mindful of a few important things. And the first is embracing transparency. I reckon this is my number one piece of advice, both in life and in the workplace. Emphasizing open and transparent communication from every single individual is, in my opinion, the only way to foster a truly inclusive culture. Being really mindful of things like active listening, valuing diverse opinions, demonstrating vulnerability at all levels, and being mindful of things like microaggressions and unconscious biases are really important. People sometimes resist engaging in very personal conversations when they join a new team, but it's a vital part of the equation. Modeling vulnerability acts as the kind of social proof that some people need to feel comfortable opening up. But you need to be aware that when you do share with this kind of vulnerability, it can open the door to uncomfortable conversations. It has the potential to open the door to insensitivity or conflict. Part of embracing inclusivity is a willingness to confront these uncomfortable conversations and situations. We've got to really challenge our idea about things that we don't understand in order to broaden our thinking and to behave with compassion. And then there are power balances to consider. The effects of communicating as a flat organisation are super valuable. By eliminating the concept of hierarchy between leadership and employees, you make communication easier and more comfortable for everyone. Anyone on my team will tell you that I bang on and on and on about the fact that just because I'm the boss does not make my opinion any more important or valuable than anybody else's. I am just a person doing a job. And the fact that that job happens to be managing everyone else doing their job does not make me any more important. Good CEOs and good leaders know that they know the least about what's happening in an organisation, and that's why you hire experts, and it's those experts that we need to empower to make sure their voices are heard. I encourage everyone on my team to challenge my ideas, to speak up when they have something to share, and I commit to doing the same with radical candour. I asked one of our team members what she thinks the key drivers behind our positive culture of sharing are, and this is what she said, and it makes my heart sing. Hearing really honest, unguarded stories from all levels can powerfully influence people's feelings of inclusion. Understanding another person's story, the good and the bad, can really break down interpersonal barriers. Sharing the things that are taking our energy away from work or the things that are making us feel distracted might be the key to unlocking somebody else's reticence about sharing their struggles. Recognizing that everyone's on a personal journey and that there are lots of similarities can really dispel the limitations that people often impose upon themselves. But more than that, it's really valuable and it's really rewarding to do it. If you lead with empathy and compassion, you'll forge stronger relationships with others and they will follow suit. Being really self-aware, being open about your struggles, and listening without judgment are all vital behaviours to model. Evidence shows that team members that have trusting relationships with management and leadership are much better able to take advantage of critical feedback and other opportunities to learn. But even with the best behaviour modelling, it can still be a really daunting experience to join a new team and share difficult things openly, especially if they relate to your skills or to the job that you've just been hired to do. One of the most important things we have learnt to do is share the other parts of ourselves that influence how we show up at work. Don't you love that top bit about the bats kicking ass? I love that. By doing this, we learn to grow together in a way that supports us to bring our whole selves to work, because it sets up a framework that can really support the more difficult communication. Being open about our personal circumstances or our unexpected situations really encourages a culture of sharing that connects us much more deeply. We embrace the opportunity to share more about ourselves. Many of our team include a what's going on at home section of their weekly check-in. Others talk about their pets or their hobbies or their gardens or their kids. And these aren't topics that just a handful of people choose to share. We've created a culture where everyone feels comfortable doing it. And I think that's magic. To be fair, I look for the magic everywhere. And now I'm running out of time, so I'm going to wrap up with some key takeaways. Build your community where you do your work. You've got to store all your work-related documentation in the same place that you have your non-work-related discussions. If people have to visit separate spaces to do different things, you run the risk of creating silos or cohorts. Help people find their tribe. Create a welcoming place that makes people feel like they've come home. You want to satisfy their primordial desire to belong somewhere. As one of my teammates says, around the cozy campfire, it's very easy to open up and share your intimate stories. So it's our job as community builders to build that cozy campfire. Promote cross-cultural awareness and education. Celebrate the diversity of your team. Talk about food and traditions and wildlife and holidays. The more that you know about the people you work with, the more you understand and enjoy your interactions. Make space for people to celebrate what's important for them. In a diverse workplace, it probably doesn't make sense to shut down for Christmas. Allow your team to take the holidays that are important and valuable to them. Check out this awesome list of holidays that my team celebrates. Don't dictate strict rules around engagement or about outfits. This is one of my favorite outfits. Allow people to try new ways of connecting. The structure and the quality of interactions is much more important than the format or the frequency. You've got to create flexibility for people to do what works for them. Champion a culture of collaboration. An inclusive workplace culture values people's abilities instead of focusing on their limitations. So talk about things like imposter syndrome frequently and openly, and empower people to contribute their own original thinking. Build a strong culture of recognition. Acknowledging success and celebrating achievements is a fundamental part of all of this. You've got to call out wonderful things when they happen. Don't wait till performance review time. Encourage people to be proud of sharing their success and openly celebrate it when they do. Seek feedback and be prepared to make changes. Actively seeking feedback helps us to understand the different experiences and perspectives of our team members. Don't be afraid to ask questions that's going to stimulate discussion. But make sure you treat feedback as a real gift and leverage it to make a healthy change within your organization. And have space for fun. In real life, the office comes with all the benefits of Friday lunches, end-of-year parties, Friday drinks. You've got to work a lot harder to achieve that level of camaraderie in a remote workplace. So you've got to lean heavily on your internal community. Remember that as professional community builders, we always ask people to make a series of micro-commitments before they make one large commitment. So you've got to have lots of opportunities for people to interact in ways that aren't highly taxing. And this, go all in. Most of us spend more time at work than doing anything else. So you've got to be the champion of the change that you want to see. I'm going to close with a beautiful proverb for my own people, the Māori people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Hei aha te mea nui o te au. Hei tangata, hei tangata, hei tangata. Thank you.